All right, this is Mr. McMurray here, and so we're going to start looking at different tissues and in particular epithelial tissue, okay, or epithelium, it's called for short. All right, before we do that, first of all, let's talk about your body. Now, obviously, this doesn't look exactly like your body, at least I hope not, but it's an important point here is one, when you take food in your mouth, it goes down your esophagus, your stomach, and all through your intestines and so forth, and it comes out the feces. All right, that is all considered an external surface. It's the outside of your body because it's exposed to air here and it goes all the way through down here and it's exposed to air from both ends. And so therefore that is actually an outside surface of your body. And so when we talk about epithelial or mucosal membranes that cover the outside surface of your body, that would include that. Okay, because you're exposed to bacteria and stuff, just as though your skin would be. We talked about how your skin protects you from bacteria and stuff. Well, you need protection in these areas too. Actually, bacteria in this case is not so protection from them, but they actually do things for us. They help digest our food. A lot of what we say, oh, I digest my food, probably a fair amount of that. It's also done by the actual bacteria living down there. We benefit from that, as well as some of them make vitamin K and other useful things for us. And a lot of them just take up space that keeps bad bacteria from having a space to live. Anyhow, so that's that. But also your lungs, there's air goes straight there into the inside of your lungs, at least, would be an external surface of your body. Your urinary and reproductive systems are also have openings to the outside, so they would also be considered. Your ears, both your inner ear, which opens into your mouth, and your outer ear, of course, which opens to the outside. All of those would be external surfaces of your body. Okay, so other parts like your blood, and it's all closed within, it's a closed system within the body, and it does not. Organs on that, like the liver and spleen and pancreas, would also be not considered outside surface. They do not open any way out to the outer world, okay? And so only certain systems are, but these systems that are open to the outside world are considered exterior surfaces, even though they're inside your body, all right? Now, for these particular notes, I'm going to give you a rough draft of what's going to look like. So when you draw it on your piece of paper, it gives you a little idea what to fill in. This first one's going to be small. You could probably put it on your paper up and down, sideways, probably fit just fine. I'm going to write a little bit underneath here, okay? But let's go ahead and check this out. So first of all, types of tissues. All right, we're not talking Kleenex and Puffs and, great value, which is what we usually get. But anyhow, or Kirtland if we go to Costco. But anyhow, epithelial tissue or epithelium. If it's just one word, epithelium, that just covers it. But if you call it tissue, it's going to be epithelial tissue, okay? But same thing. It's a type of tissue. All right, we're going to talk about that in more detail shortly. Connective tissue. This connects things. This would be like your ligaments and your tendons that connect your bones and your muscles. It includes things like fat. It's considered connective tissue. Your blood, it connects different parts of your body by carrying things from one part of your body to the other. And so that's considered connective tissue. We'll also talk about connective tissue more in just a moment. Now, these other two types of tissues, we will have whole chapters on them later probably. So we will talk about them then, but we're not going to do a lot of detail now. Okay, muscle tissue we'll talk about when we get to the muscular system, but there are three main types of muscle. We want to cover that at least now. All right, and the first one is skeletal muscle. When we talk about muscles, this is what moves our arms and our legs and our fingers and our toes and our mouth and smile and wiggle your ears and whatever. These are all skeletal muscles. These are ones that you control voluntarily, and they look like this. I would draw a little short picture if I were you. It's kind of a long tube, has these little striations, so it's sometimes called striated muscle. Okay, and these are the little parts that contract and expand, and that's why you have these little slots here. They have a nucleus. In fact, you notice some cells have more than one nucleus. There's one cell here. They're very long and skinny, and so they may have multiple nuclei to help make sure they're all contracting when they need to and all that kind of stuff, being in order with it. All right, that's your skeletal muscle. Those are ones you choose to control. Smooth muscle, it's called that because it doesn't have all these little striations on it or little marks on it. Okay, they look smooth, and you notice they get thick in the middle and they taper off on each end. Sometimes that's called spindle shaped. But basically, these are around your organs. For example, they squeeze and push food down your intestines and stuff like that. Okay, your stomach muscles would be smooth muscle. If I remember correctly, the arteries have muscle in them. Those would be smooth muscle as well. Okay, and so they look smoother, and that's how they get their name. They are involuntary. You don't sit around thinking, oh, I need to push that food through my intestines. I've been letting it sit there for the last 30 minutes. Otherwise, we'd all probably be in pretty bad trouble there. So they are involuntary. They do your brain does it without you even thinking about it. Now, the last one is cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle, notice, looks a lot like skeletal muscle. It has striations, okay? It has nuclei in it, but you notice that they branch off. Like here's one cardiac cell that branches, okay? And here's another one up here that kind of branches into two pieces. So cardiac muscle branches, and that's the difference. They also have these very dark membranes between one cell and the next, okay? Not the striations, but when you get to the next one, there's this dark thing. It's called an intercalated disc. Don't worry about that right now, but we'll talk about that later. But that is the cardiac muscle, okay? And that's your heart. Unlike this, it is considered involuntary. You don't think about telling your heart to beat, nor does your brain tell your heart to beat. Your heart has a pacemaker that tells it when to beat. Your nervous system can speed it up or slow it down, but your heart is totally in control of when it beats. All right, so muscle tissue, just to summarize real quick, it is skeletal, which is voluntary. Now, you can have reflexes and stuff when your muscles move without you telling them to, but since you can control them, they're considered voluntary, even if they do it without your control. Smooth are the involuntary muscles that squeeze your organs and move food through your system and stuff like that. Things happen without us thinking about them. And then finally, cardiac muscle is the heart muscle, which is also involuntary. In fact, it does not even have your nervous system tell it what to do. The heart is in charge of telling itself when to beat. All right, then types of tissues, last kind is nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is made mostly of neurons. Neurons carry signals. That's just what nervous tissue does. So they have a cell body with a nucleus, but then they have these long strands, and these may go up to 4 feet or more in some cases. There's one that reaches from your buttocks all the way down to your foot, and it's about 3 or 4 feet or maybe more, depending on how tall you are. So they can be very, very long and strung out. Okay, that these are your nervous tissues, and these are called neurons. Okay, and so neurons are just another name for nerve cells. However, since they are carrying electrical signals, just like electrical wires that have rubber coating on the outside, these have what's called neuroglia. Neuro means neuron, and glue. So it's like a glue, sticky coating on the outside that insulates them, keeps the signal from short-circuiting with other signals, and keeps the signal going where it needs to go. So those are neuroglia. All right. Now, the next one's going to be a little bit bigger. We're going to talk about epithelial tissues and how we can classify them. All right, and I think if you look at this, that tells you about. I would probably turn your paper sideways for this one, unless you just write really small. All right, epithelial tissue is generally on the outside, whether your skin or on the outside of your organs, or the lining of your organs. Okay, remember the inside of your stomach and your esophagus and intestines is an outside surface, so they are going to be covered in epithelial tissue. All right, now, so it forms outer layers of organs, so on the outer layer of the organs or outer layer of the organism, your skin, or linings inside the organs, okay, but it's the outer or outmost layer of the inside of your stomach. So it's the outer layer of the inner lining, okay? All right, so anyhow, now their functions depend on where they're at. For example, your skin is mostly going to be protection, okay, protection against bumps, chemicals, bacteria, etc. If it's in your small intestines, it might be more about absorbing things, okay, absorbing digested food. Or in your large intestines, it reabsorbs water back into your body. So that might be its job. In your kidneys, they might be filtrating. They're going to help filter the things in your blood, and so get rid of the waste products and stuff. And in other areas, they may secrete things. It may be mucus that helps stuff slide through your digestive system. It may be acid, which is in your stomach, that helps to kind of doesn't really digest your food, but it kind of pre-softens it up and gets it ready, okay? It does the prep work, if you will, getting it ready for digestion. So all those kind of things, it may secrete stuff. All right, now your epithelial tissue is a top layer, but it attaches to a basement membrane, okay? If you pull on your skin, you can kind of pull it up a little bit, but it goes right back when you let go, it goes right back to where it was. Why? Because it's attached to this basement membrane below it, and also connective tissue. Next week when we dissect roadkill and we try to peel the skin or fur back so we can see stuff, you'll notice that we have to cut this attachment here so that you can peel it off. And the bigger the animal is, like deer and stuff, it's even harder to do. It's tough tissue that really holds it on there. All right, but that's part of epithelial tissue. All right, now, because these are on the outside layer where they wear off, and even on the linings where food's moving through the intestines and stuff, it tends to wear off really easily. So it has to regenerate or make new cells quite often. Okay, so these are cells that divide pretty regularly. However, they are also avascular, which means they have no blood vessels, and therefore there are no nutrients being delivered directly to the tissue. The basement membrane below it does have blood vessels, and underneath our skin, for example, we have blood and stuff. But if you scratch the actual skin layers, a lot of times it just leaves a little white line, but it doesn't actually bleed. Or if it cuts it, but it may sting a little bit if you get something in it, but it doesn't actually bleed. That's because you haven't actually got down to the levels that have blood below the actual skin. All right, and so the layers that are right above that get plenty of nutrients, and so those are the ones that regenerate and make new copies. But as they get pushed higher up, as you make new cells, it pushes the old cells up, then the old cells start to die because they're so far away from the blood supply they can't stay alive. And just like your skin cells, the top ones are dead, okay, and that's why they flake off all the time. Well, the ones inside your body are just going to flake off into, say, the digestive system or whatever, okay, but it still happens because they don't have blood vessels in them, so only the bottom layers that touch the basement membrane can survive. All right, now we can also classify these tissues by, when we talk about epithelial tissue, we do it by their shape and by their layers. So let's talk about shape first. Okay, the first kind is squamish, looks like squaw, has nothing to do with Indians, female Indians, but it does think of squashed. Okay, in this case it actually means flattened, like scales on a fish. They've been flattened out. So these are very flattened shaped cells, okay? And so this would be an example of squamish. Now, they're going to be sharp rectangle edges. No, I don't know why they draw them that way. They'd be all rounded and everything. But you notice how if this is a side view, if you cut it in half and looked at it, you would see a side view. It's very flattened, and that would be the squamish cells, very flat cells, okay? More like tiles, if you will, on the floor. Okay, cuboidal, oidal means like, so they are cube shaped. Now, are they actually cubes like a dice? A pair of dice or something like that? No, not exactly, but let's look at them. Key thing is, whereas squamish cells are a lot wider but not very tall, cuboidal are about as tall as they are wide. Once again, are they going to be perfectly hexagonal or cubal or no, not exactly, but they will be kind of round and squished in against other cells. But if the cells are about as wide as they are tall, then we would call them cuboidal, okay, because they look like a cube or a cube-like. All right, and the last one would be columnar or columnar. Okay, and these are tall and thin. So in other words, they're going to be taller or longer than they are wide. All right, so some examples of those real quick. Once again, not a perfect hexagon, not whatever. But you can see how they're much taller than they are wide. They might be very skinny, okay, maybe half as wide as these, and they're going to be kind of maybe fatter at one end, skinnier at the other end, whatever. But they're going to be long, skinny cells, and those would be columnar epithelial cells. All right. Now, the other way we classify them is by how many layers they come in. Some are very thin, like on the outside of organs, maybe very thin, clearish layers. Others, like your skin, are going to be a lot thicker with lots of layers. All right. If it's simple, it's just a single layer. So simple epithelial would just be one layer of cells. Okay. And for example, in your lungs have a single layer of cells, which allows oxygen to get in and out, particularly from into the cells and into the blood vessels in these cells, and so they would be simple. And if they're flattened, they would be simple squamish. If they were cuboidal, it would be simple cuboidal. If they were tall, thin cells, they'd be simple columnar. All right. Now, if there's more than one layer, then they're called stratified. Strata, like strata of rocks, means layers of rocks, or stratus clouds, or layered clouds that we see, thin layered clouds that cover the whole sky. Okay, so if it's layered, then it's called stratified. Now, in this case, even these big ones at the bottom are wider than they are tall, so they're all considered squamish, and they are stratified squamish. As they get up to the top, you know, they just get flatter and flatter. This would be like your skin cells, because by the time they get up here, they're dead, and they're just little packets of protein, so they're not much to them at all. All the cytoplasm stuff has disappeared, okay? So those would be stratified squamish. If you had cuboidal cells that were stacked, they would be stratified cuboidal. If you had columnar, they would be stratified columnar. All right, and so that is our last layer. And so stratified means that there's more than one layer. All right, and so by combining either their shapes and their layers, we can talk about these different types of epithelial tissue. All right, we will stop there and we'll talk more about what these different layers and shapes are used for in different parts of your body on the next note. So stay tuned for the next exciting episode from Mr. McMurray's Epithelial Tissue Notes.